From Microbe TV, this is TWiP. This Week in Parasitism, episode 114, recorded on August 11th, 2016. This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream, a subscription streaming service, not screaming, streaming, that offers over 1,400 documentaries and nonfiction series from the world's best filmmakers. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month, and for our audience, the first 2 months are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/microbe and use the promo code MICROBE. This episode is also sponsored by Drobo, a family of safe, expandable, yet simple-to-use storage arrays. Drobos are designed to protect your important data forever. Visit drobo.com to learn more. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and joining me today are the two co-hosts of TWiP, Dickson Despommier.
Hello, Vincent.
And Daniel Griffin.
Hello.
How's that?
That's great.
That was very
gang.
Very well done.
And they're both sitting here. We all sit at one desk here in New York City at Columbia University Medical Center. And the day today is beautiful, isn't it, Dickson? Hot as hell.
It looks beautiful, but it doesn't feel.
Hot and humid. But Daniel is probably used to this because where you came from Cambodia and Thailand. I'll bet it was even hotter and more humid, right?
Yeah, I'm just relieved because my knees are not sweating.
Your knees? What does that mean?
It was just so hot and humid there, and you're not in air, or I was not in air conditioning. I should say you're not. Some people maybe were. But no, here it's very pleasant. It's air conditioned.
It's
your knees. I never heard of your knees. Did you have a good trip?
I had a fantastic trip.
And you ate well?
I ate very well.
Did you cure diseases?
I hopefully I was helpful. Hopefully I had some helpful comments.
What was the most frequent affliction that you saw while you were there?
It probably was dengue, actually. It was interesting. They were very worried in Thailand that this was going to be a particularly bad year for dengue with the El Nino effect. Wow. But it was really when I crossed the border into Cambodia, and it's just the way the rains were falling. And Cambodia is really having a tough time with the number of dengue cases. I was working in a children's hospital there, and lots of kids with dengue hemorrhagic fever.
Tough. No Zika.
That's the challenge. They don't have a lot of diagnostics, or they're not using a lot of diagnostics. So you would bring up, here's a kid, they have a fever, it looks like dengue, but they've got a conjunctivitis, making you start to think this could be this could be Zika. But they're not doing the testing. And their perspective, right, is we're resource limited. We're trying to take care of the patient. Yeah. If someone wants to know about the presence of Zika in this area, they need to come in, with grant funding or some public health money.
So what you're saying is most of the hospitals do not do viral diagnostics.
I think that's accurate, actually. Wow. I mean, particularly in Cambodia, but a lot of Thailand. And that was their comment was, we could confirm this, but it's not going to change treatment, whether it's chikungunya, dengue, Zika. If it's chikungunya and their joints are still hurting in 3 or 4 months, we'll know. Yeah. And we don't need to know now. What we need to know now is, just to take care of them.
In terms of epidemiology of virus infections, it would be nice to know what's going on there.
Absolutely.
Right? I have to say, I don't fully agree with the idea of we don't need to know. I think, and this came up before with every doctor needing a lab. If you don't have a lab, if you don't have constant feedback, you don't have any self-correction.
Right.
And so you don't know that there's something like Zika. So you don't suddenly start thinking about pregnant women and the considerations that might come to bear there. The potential hemorrhagic complications with dengue.
Listen, SARS started like that too. It caught them completely by surprise, and they didn't do the right thing, and that's what happens.
Yeah, so I think the lab aspect is important, particularly when you think you know what it is, so that you keep getting the feedback, so that when it is a presentation like I described, where the eyes are irritated, you get the conjunctivitis, the rash is not quite typical. The timing of the rash might be a little bit off. That could be an atypical presentation of perhaps dengue. It could also be something that we haven't identified yet that's starting to come in that we may want to know about.
So money is the big hamper of whether or not you do a test or not. Well, what does a Zika test cost?
It's a PCR test, essentially.
Here.
And if you want to add serology, which would help, and especially IgM, so that you know it's a recent infection, it adds up. It adds up. You need to have the equipment. You need to have trained people. I'm sure we could train them to do it. We could bring in. And so, there are other parts of the world where people have made efforts to train people to do tests, bring the equipment in. But, it's expensive. Something like the Gates Foundation could do this. They could say, let's pinpoint a number of hospitals throughout the countries, give them the equipment they need. I mean, it's a PCR machine and some material for ELISAs. It's not huge. It's not millions of dollars.
The dengue NS1 test, for instance, is really, they have these little cards. It's like a pregnancy test.
That's right. They're card-based.
So they're very easy to use. And I think, as you bring up, Vincent, there's two important places to have them. One is just a general epidemiology, so we're keeping track of what's going on in the country. And the other is the self-correction of your clinicians, so that they, because if you're teaching, particularly other doctors, you want to make sure you're teaching them the right thing. When you say, oh, this is dengue, see this, you want to then, and we confirmed it, so I'm telling you.
I guess the addition of Zika has made it more urgent to be able to diagnose, because as you said, if you have Zika circulating, it's a threat to pregnant women. And it's worse than having, aches in your joints and so forth, because the kids can be born with big problems, and that puts an even bigger burden on the healthcare system of the country.
Exactly.
Right? So, but there are many countries in the world, I would guess, that need basic diagnostics. And we often we talk about curing or preventing infectious diseases, right, as the front line, but we don't often talk about having the diagnostic capability.
Well, I remember when I was active in the American Society for Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, there were a number of initiatives to try to simplify the diagnosis for malaria. Because without a microscope and without antibodies or without, sophisticated equipment, how could you possibly make the diagnosis for malaria? And they actually figured out a way to do it using a capillary tube that you could draw blood up into. And if you had malaria, it gave a different interface between the serum and the blood.
There are simple ways. But Ebola is the example. We needed diagnostic capability plus containment. So many countries went in and built it.
That's right.
And they made Ebola treatment centers where they have PCR machines, dozens and dozens, to train people to do it. That's what you need to do on a big scale.
Remember, for the TWiP episodes, we've discussed the disadvantages. What if you had a Zika vaccine? Could you use it in a dengue endemic country? And
it's a tough question. We don't know the answer yet. But and vice versa, will a dengue vaccine, which is just being deployed, be an issue for Zika? We're going to learn in the next few years. We don't know at the moment.
Complicated stuff.
And that's why we need some fundamental Zika research here in the U.S., and we need money for that.
You bet.
Congress needs to really get back from vacation and allocate some
They've
funds.
been on vacation for about 4... No, that's not.
Well, hopefully they're well rested, ready to take on many challenges.
Their mind is clear.
As Harold Varma said, we need a emergency fund, several $1 billion. I view it as sort of like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You know what that is, Dickson? No, you don't know?
Yes, I do know what that is.
They store petroleum underground somewhere out west.
In the salt mines. They put it in the empty salt mines down in Louisiana and places like that.
And it doesn't get salty?
It doesn't get absorbed back into the ground.
The salt
domes
that
are empty, they fill up.
So if we need that, we can take it. In the same way, we need to have $5 billion set aside. We can take that out of the military budget. Look at it this way, gentlemen. We have a $600 and some million military budget to prevent foreign countries from attacking us. We also need a big
Did you say
budget.
million or didn't you mean billion?
Billion. It's billion. Sorry, I did say it's billion. We have a $30 billion NIH budget to protect us from infectious diseases, among other things, that need to go up, right? All right. After that little lecture,
all right,
let's get on to our last case, which Daniel may remember. It was from number 113. Remind us, Daniel, what we have here.
Yes, this was a case of a 22-year-old female who had come into a clinic in the Bronx reporting 1 week of vaginal discharge and itching. I think Vincent's note says, looks bad and yellowish. The discharge looks bad and yellowish. She reported being sexually active with her boyfriend. The boyfriend reported no symptoms. She reported some discomfort on urination. She said in general she's healthy, no prior surgeries or allergies. She lives with her mother who has diabetes, her father who has high blood pressure. She takes oral contraceptive pills. She's not employed. She also has some sisters living with her. Everybody else is healthy. There is maybe some substance abuse, maybe some marijuana and alcohol, but no IV drugs, no pets. She eats lots of fast food. And on physical exam, she had a vaginal discharge. She was a slightly heavy woman. This discharge was slight yellow, light green in color. There was not a strong odor, and there was some redness to the vaginal walls, no changes to the cervix, and it was 2 weeks since her last menstrual period.
Dickson, I think you ought to take the first one. Are you able to do that? First male?
Sure.
The first guess? Or did you want to rest a little more?
No, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. Mike writes, Hola, amigos. While Daniel was reading this case, I could feel Dickson itching in his seat for all the way across the country. I hope my senses are correct. Self-control is hard, I know. It was in some way wishing this woman's problems were caused by mobiluncus? Am I saying that right?
Mobiluncus.
Mobiluncus, because it is such a cool name, but I guess we'll have to wait for it to appear on TWiP. Now the little voice in my head, we will call him Bill, is screaming, ontological parsimony. So I'm going with my first instinct of trichomonal infection, but the lack of odor is rather puzzling. It's possible in this world containing vast quantities of feminine hygiene products that this woman has been douching with to control the smell. The boyfriend, on the other hand, may just be symptomless, clueless. His real problem is quite likely T-gonde of the brain, which could explain his obsession with kitty parts, but more study is required. P.S. Researching this case led me to a site that says trichomoniasis, or a yeast infection, can smell like malt beer. Yeah, right. There was a time in my life when I probably would have done anything for free beer, but not anymore. I now know more about feminine hygiene than I ever could have ever hoped for, not to mention the YouTube videos that left me scared for life. Scarred for life, alas. Mike from Oregon.
So his guess is trichomoniasis.
Trichomoniasis.
All right.
Joseph writes.
Wait, before that, there was one word.
Writes, one word. Trichomonas.
Really succinct.
Okay, take the next one, Dan.
Joseph writes. Tema, not two. Joseph writes, Dear TWiP Troika, my main guess for this case would be Trichomonas Vaginalis. This is the most common non-viral sexually transmitted infection in the world. Symptoms would mostly match with what has been given for the case. Burning with urination, redness of the vaginal walls, vaginitis, and discharge. Furthermore, symptoms are rare in males, and so the partner could have had the infection and unknowingly passed it on to the patient. Mm-hmm. The reasons that I'm not 100% certain of this diagnosis is that the discharge was described as non-odorous and thick, while trichomoniasis usually leads to a thin, odorous discharge. I would get a wet mount slide of the vaginal epithelium to visualize the parasite. Furthermore, Dr. Griffin stated that there may be more than one thing going on, so I would guess that she may be co-infected with another bacterium. Gardnerella vaginalis, which also gives very similar symptoms as trichomonas. A wet mount could differentiate the two, but both can be treated with metronidazole. Candida would have a thick, white, cheesy discharge, which does seem to match our patient. Gonorrhea, chlamydia put together because these are very commonly co-infected. Gonorrhea can lead to a cloudy yellow discharge that may be contributing to our patient's symptoms. A culture or PCR could help with the diagnosis. A combination of azithromycin and ceftriaxone would be given to treat both conditions. Staph saprophyticus, also known as honeymooner cystitis. There is no reason to believe that the burning from urination could also be from a UTI independent from a vaginal infection, especially with the hypersexual nature of her partner. A urinalysis would be needed. Overall, I believe our patient does have trichomoniasis with a contribution from one of the other infections above. Lab work could be obtained to narrow down the possible culprits, and treatment could be started.
Right.
All right. Once again, our friend is from Hofstra Northwell School of Medicine, class of 2018.
Yes.
Next one is from our friend Wink in Atlanta. Dear professors, when you are in Manhattan and you hear hoofbeats, don't think of zebras.
Unless you're at the Bronx, though.
I'm going to have to go with Trichomonas. I did find old reports of amoebiasis, but there were ulcers of the vaginal mucosa. Let me take one more. Dave writes, Dear TWiP Trio, I believe the 22-year-old female patient in the Bronx clinic has contracted a case of Trichomonas Vaginalis while her boyfriend does not show signs or symptoms of the disease. Trichomoniasis is typically asymptomatic in males, but still may cause urethritis and prostatitis. The woman's symptoms are typical frothy yellow-green discharges, usually smelly, but in this instance the case may be mild and the odor has not had time to totally develop. The redness on the inside of her vaginal walls and discomfort during urination are also textbook symptoms of trichomoniasis. Treatment includes metronidazole, which has an extremely high rate of infection revolution. According to Warkowski and Berman, 2010, 95 to 97% of cases are resolved after one dose. However, there is evidence of metronidazole-resistant trichomonas, so it is advisable that the patient fully complete their treatment course.
Right.
Dickson.
Yes. Stephen writes, Good day, TWiP Triumvirate. I'm a long-time listener and even re-listened to episodes. I regretted not submitting a guest to the case of Samix lecularis a few weeks back, so here's my guess for episode 113. The patient complaining of vaginal discomfort with a milky discharge seems to be presenting with Trichomonas vaginalis, a fairly common parasitic infection found in roughly 5% of the population. Diagnosis is simple. Through a vaginal swab and wet prep slide, they often present with clue cells. I know because I perform them nearly nightly. I work as a medical lab technician while in an Arizona hospital. I have my associates, nearly a bachelor's from ASU, already planning on a master's, but now considering a PhD thanks to your podcast. I am a firm believer that one should never stop learning, and your podcast, along with the rest of the Twix family, resonates that ideal. Keep up the good work. Stephen.
Nice. We inspired another person.
Absolutely.
Love it. That's our goal.
David writes, Dear TWiP stars. Is it TWIPsters or TWiP stars?
TWiP stars, please.
I had not written in quite a while, as I was quite busy, and in more than one instance, completely clueless. That never stops us. For the young lady of TWiP 113's case, my guess is trichomoniasis. All symptoms seem to match, including the green-yellow color, the discomfort on urination, and the itching. I guess the odor would worsen over time. The disease seems to be staggeringly common in the U.S., with over 3 million infected at any time, so that makes it all the more plausible. Microscope examination or cell culture may reveal the parasite, and it can then be treated with metronidazole. I would also recommend taking an HIV test, as I read that trichomoniasis may increase the likelihood of contracting HIV. I found it a bit worrying that this was not brought up during the podcast, so let's hope there were no secondary infections. Kind regards from Nicaragua, where after a long and dry time, it has started raining, and we now have a fresh 31C. David. P.S. In an attempt for a differential diagnosis, I looked up a number of conditions that cause vaginal discharge. And he gives us a link here to healthline.com, symptom vaginal discharge. But as there's TWiP, there were no real alternatives. Furthermore, it may seem like the symptoms are typical and specific enough to avoid mistakes.
So because it is TWiP, they rule out everything else besides parasites?
Do I have to start? I may have to start throwing in non-parasitic cases just to...
I think that we should probably tell people that it doesn't necessarily have to be a parasite, right?
Right.
Well, we did say at one point I would start throwing in non-parasites just to...
I think because in real life...
Just to keep... Because we don't know. Yeah, we don't. I was... we were discussing a case in one of these outlying hospitals about an hour outside of Angkor Wat, Siem Reap, Cambodia. And I was making the comment about, when we're discussing a case. And I said, one of the reasons you may not have thought of this is you didn't realize you'd be presenting the case to us.
That's right. That's right.
So,
I can see a person going into a physician's office and saying, listen, I'm on TWiP, so this has to be a parasite.
I'm hoping to be on TWiP, so please diagnose me with a parasite.
I used to say that all the time to our medical students who questioned why we started with worms in our textbook. And then went to the protozoans. And I said, when you go into the waiting room of a hospital, they say, okay, all the protozoan parasite people, now please come in. So I wanted to also remind our listeners that we did a TWiP, I don't know how long ago, but we could look it up, with regards to the RNA, double-stranded RNA, Trichomonas virus.
Yes.
Which elicits a reaction, which gives an inflammation, which allows the HIV organism greater access to the inside of the vaginal wall and to get intracellular. So that was a very good thought process that listener just told us about, because indeed, in countries where HIV is rampant right now, Trichomonas might be playing a very central
I'm sure
role.
We'll hear whether this young lady was given an HIV test or not when we get more information from Dan.
I think we test everybody, right? Isn't that universal screening now? And so she would be included in the everybody.
So everyone who comes in for care of some sort?
You're supposed to, and they say, I think it's from 15 on up to us. I won't even give a top age, because I don't think there is a top age. Sort of the assumption that human beings stop having sexual intercourse. But no, everybody. That's sort of supposed to be the current endorsed practice. Is everybody gets an HIV test if they haven't had one, because here one of our listeners wrote in that there are 3 million cases a year of trichomoniasis. There are over 1 million people living in the United States with HIV. So it is very common. And so your chance of having an exposure, should you be sexually active, is quite high.
Yeah.
All right, our last is from Elise, who writes, Dear TWiP Trifecta, I hope this finds you all well and enjoying the last weeks of summer and about to embark upon some adventures. It's 81 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 C now, but the temperature has been lurching way up lately, and there have been lots of thunderstorms that encourage some remarkable humidity. I have a diagnosis for TWiP 113. Shall I offer my thoughts and then the differential? I believe the 22-year-old woman has become infected with trichomoniasis. All right, now let me just correct something. You're not infected with a disease. You're infected with the organism that causes the disease, but I'm sure Elise knows that. Caused by Trichomonas Vaginalis. This is not an uncommon sexually transmitted disease, and the patient's symptoms are absolutely consistent with those of trichomoniasis. She has some discomfort while urinating, a thick vaginal discharge that is yellowish or greenish, and her vaginal walls are red and irritated. Having floated this diagnosis, I will say that it would be important to do further testing to confirm my thoughts. Not everyone with trichomoniasis exhibits symptoms, and the symptoms the young woman has do resemble some other diseases that are not the result of parasites. In addition to trichomoniasis, the patient's symptoms also resemble those of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and possibly even candidiasis or bacterial vaginosis, though the vaginal discharges in these last two diseases don't classically match those of the patient. The test for trichomoniasis involves either doing a microscopic examination of the vaginal discharge, by doing a culture from the vaginal discharge, though this can take a number of days, and with a urine test. Because trichomoniasis can also make people more susceptible to contracting other sexually transmitted diseases, it is recommended that patients also get tested for gonorrhea, chlamydia, HIV, and pelvic inflammatory disease. The disease is most commonly treated with metronidazole. Treating trich is not difficult, but the patient's boyfriend should also be tested for trich since he may have the parasite and be asymptomatic. I hope she recovered quickly and that her discomfort didn't last long. As always, thank you so much for your podcast. I am looking forward to hearing your tales from the end of the summer. All right. That's it. What do we have here?
So it sounds like everybody is on the same page, so to speak.
Totally on the same page.
And they're also on the same page as I'm going to mention. So we did additional testing. One is we did a pH. We tested the vaginal fluid for its pH.
Wow.
And this is actually something that's important. You need a narrow spectrum pH paper, because you really don't want the stuff that maybe people remember from chemistry lab that goes from like a pH of 1 up to 12 14. Or something, or Yeah, you don't need the whole 0 to 14 range. But this is a narrow spectrum, and there was a slight elevation in the vaginal pH. As mentioned, a wet prep was done to look for, I think we're mentioning clue cells, maybe motile protozoans. GC and chlamydia testing was done, which was negative.
Okay.
HIV testing was done, which was negative.
Okay.
Another very common sexually transmitted infection in this country that has been increasing in incidence was also tested for syphilis,
sure.
and that was negative.
Yeah.
But what did we see when we looked at the wet mount? But swimming around.
You saw these little flagellated things.
Exactly.
How about that?
Yeah. So everybody was actually correct. We saw the trichomonas swimming about. And it's really, as we talked about, it's key to have a good lab here. You need a microscope. You need a slide. It's not a lot, but that is a lot to have access to. You only have about 10 minutes to look at this. If you send it off to the lab and more than 10 minutes go by, they'll stop moving. They may be hard to detect. It's going to be hard to make this diagnosis. So, we immediately looked. If you look within a minute or two, you want to basically take the wet prep, immediately look at it under the microscope, and we were able to see the trichomonas and give her that diagnosis.
There you go.
Now, there are some other things, right, that can cause. And actually, let's go to that wonderful page, right, the Healthline page. Because they actually discuss some of the different presentations. They discuss people that come in with like a white, clumpy, curdy, cottage cheese-like discharge. And
they wouldn't use food analogies in pathology, but they do. They do. They just can't resist.
That ruins things for you,
Anchovy paste. I've gone through the litany of all this during my teaching days, and I've lost my appetite for all that stuff.
Yes. Well, I suggest that for Dickson's well-being, we introduce more.
I take that as a direct insult.
But
I resemble that remark.
Okay. But yeah, so that would be typical of, I think a lot of women would recognize this as a candidal infection if it was a white, curdy discharge. You can actually get like just a clear, benign, watery discharge just from a lot of exercise. Then they talk about, let's see what they have here. I'm going to jump ahead to when there's a really strong fishy smell and sort of a oily, fishy odor. That might be our bacterial vaginosis, which we're still trying to understand. Actually, it seems to be an issue with which bacteria are in our in a woman's vaginal tract. And I think that was where our buddy was talking. Let's see what he was excited. The mobilicus organisms that can cause the bacterial vaginosis. The chlamydia and gonorrhea can often have a yellow greenish discharge. And I always like to point out, maybe this is like you can tell which physicians have trained with me. I always ask them like, so if it's green or yellow, what is making it green or yellow? Because we always have to stay in bacteria to see them. But the green is actually coming from neutrophil myeloperoxidase. So what is yellow but light green? And the greener it gets, the more activated neutrophil products we're seeing. So any sort of infection, for instance, a pelvic inflammatory disease, you can actually get a really thick, heavy green discharge. Where the foul smelling of the bacterial vaginosis, it's not really so much an infection as a conversion of the nitrites due to bacterial. And so that's giving that.
So what happened to the frothy exudate that's so typical for Trichomonas? I was curious as to what you might think about that one.
She obviously didn't read the textbook.
Well, the organism...
and I think a bunch of people made that comment, why wasn't the smell as strong as, the textbooks might say?
No, female hygiene deodorants would probably cover up some of this, but not the production of hydrogen. I mean, this organism produces H2. Because it's got hydrogenesis.
I was gonna prompt you to make the address.
Right. I am amazed that Craig Venter hasn't glommed onto this one yet, because he spent a long time searching the ocean wide for hydrogen secreting microbes, and here's one that was right in the vaginal tract. And if you could somehow take the cassette of the hydrogenosome and insert that into some common organism that you could grow at will, you could produce all the hydrogen you ever wanted. And you've got the hydrogen car and the hydrogen sort of energy pathway, because I think that hydrogen is a fantastic non-polluting fuel. So it just is an aside, because here's a typical example of something that's right next door. You could find this one and work with this for a long time. I don't know anyone that's working with this.
Well, you don't know much anyways.
I don't know. Well, that's very unkind of you to say that.
You don't know anyone who's working. Have you polled the entire world? Have you searched to see?
I've searched.
You're not aware of any.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's likely that it's going on.
That is what I said.
Well, hopefully people are working on this. And you are right. I mean, that is, they always talk about the characteristic things and that characteristic, frothiness, you definitely can see. I saw this person myself, so I was not impressed that the classic frothiness was there. I would have liked it to be there, because it would have been a nice lead-in.
Sure. No, so remind us again as to how long she's been suffering from this.
Is it a week maybe that we said?
See, so it's early.
It was only about a week.
It's early in the game. I mean, these things can be chronic and last a long time untreated, right? So,
yeah. And it's interesting too. I mean, I'll comment about the odor. The odor, you've got to think about the odor sort of metric of the clinician, because a strong odor is that strong, fishy bacterial vaginosis smell. Yeah. So though, this did not smell normal. Your metric, your metric adjusts, because as a clinician, you're often looking at, okay, it's not that strong, fishy odor. It's the.
So another aside, but I think we did mention this in an earlier TWiP. Wayne Miller was the admitting attending in OBGYN, and he was my trout fishing partner for many years, and did the pelvic examinations. And I had just come off of my postdoc over at Rockefeller, working with Miklos Mueller, who is a world expert on trichomoniasis. So Wayne treats this woman, and it doesn't go away. And he treats her again, and it doesn't go away. And he treats it again, and it doesn't go away. And he says, would you like a drug-resistant strain of Trichomonas? And I said, how do you know it's drug-resistant? And he told me. We took the sample, stuck it in some glycothiolate medium.
Thioglycolate.
That too. Remember, I'm lisdectic.
Okay.
And I rushed it over to Miklos Mueller's lab, and he cultured it out, and sure enough, it was metronidazole resistant, and it was the first case. So that was discovered right here.
I searched PubMed, and there's not a lot of activity in people studying trichomonads and hydrogen, but there are some papers, but not for the past few years.
How about the genome? Has that been sequenced?
Trichomonas genome sequence. Let's see.
Because if it has, then the hydrogenosome enzyme pathway is all widely known.
Yeah, complete genome. Yeah.
They have a
also, Giardia also makes hydrogen.
I didn't know that.
I found a paper saying that. Yeah. So, what was the treatment? Metronidazole?
They don't have hydrogen.
No, they don't. But they make hydrogen. That's what the paper said.
That's extremely interesting.
Giardia makes hydrogen without a hydrogenosome.
I did not know. How old a paper is that?
Very old. Over 15 years old.
That's too old.
So it means it's probably wrong, right, Dickson?
Well, I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it mentioned since. I haven't never heard that mentioned.
Check it out. Maybe we'll do the paper on TWiP.
You know what? let's check it out. Right.
I guess we can, because it's a Giardia. But anyway, so she was given the metronidazole comes as these 500 milligram tablets. So you give her 4. Just take 4 of these, boom, and we've treated you right away.
And what do you tell her to do while she's taking them? Or not to do?
Don't drink.
Oh, see, I'm Irish, so I just,
drink less.
But no, and something else comes up is we talked about the partner.
Yes.
The males can be symptomatic.
Was he tested? I forgot.
So he was not tested. And what we do in New York is something called expedited partner therapy, which apparently is not legal in every state.
Treat them anyway?
You treat them. You treat them presumptively. You say, if she's got it and you're sexually active, you have it.
And they're using unprotected sex. You say that. Because if they were using condoms, then he wouldn't have it.
Because how often does a condom break? 1 every 10 or 20 times? So even with condoms, right? All right, Dickson.
Come on, you took 2 shots at me. You might as well take the last one.
We're your friend. That's why we take
No. I'm taking this all in a grain of...
in stride.
A large dome of salt.
Yeah. But no, and the nice thing is to be able to right then say, here you go. And this clinic had that capacity to be able to say, here you go. Here's your treatment. Here's your partner's treatment. Right. You're both treated. you try and you say for the next week, why don't you, refrain from this degree of physical intimacy while y'all get better? Because, let's say it persists a little bit in one versus the other. Who knows? And then the hope is that then you've cured both of them, and then they'll stay in a monogamous relationship, and that's the last time they'll have trick.
Sure.
But,
in a perfect world, that'll happen.
That actually brings up the question, how did she acquire it?
Yeah, well.
At some point, somebody in this relationship had sex with somebody who had trichomonas.
Either he or she, right?
True.
But Dickson, a long time ago on TWiP, you mentioned that it can also be acquired
during birth.
And you have it all your life?
By the female, yes.
So it establishes a persistent infection.
It does.
Just in the genital area, nowhere else.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't infect anywhere.
So and a physician in the Philippines who used to listen, he said, I didn't know that. Thank you. Because he said whenever he finds it, he figures you're having sex. But
well, it's usually detectable once puberty is reached by the female, because then everything changes to a normal adult type behavior, and then it starts to produce symptoms.
All right. One more thing. I used to work on Trichomonas.
Do you
remember?
I remember you telling me.
So when I graduated from college, I got a job as a lab tech.
Do remember that.
In a company in New Jersey that made reproductive products, shall we say. They made lots of condoms, but they also made spermicides and some kind of ointment to treat vaginosis, trichomonas.
Interesting.
And I would do quality control on this project every Friday, on the product. Every Friday, I would get in. Actually, we had cultures of trick growing. We would grow them, and then every Friday I'd make dilutions of this ointment and mix it and look at them under the microscope and make sure it killed them.
Yeah.
I did the same with the spermicides.
How about that?
We would get donor sperm.
So were you the one with the pin putting a hole in every 20th condom?
No, we just had donors. They would pay them. They would pay donors, and I'd come in on Friday morning and open the. Yeah. We had a incubator, 37 degrees, and there'd be a little vial of sperm, and I would make dilutions and I'd test it. But the tricks we had in culture, I remember you could see them very nicely. Little protozoans with a flagella, and they would swim around.
Animals.
Yeah.
Trichomonas.
They are amazing animals.
Forgot the name of the product. So, yes, I worked for about 6 months on that. It was very interesting. It made me want to go back to school.
Oh, that's good.
I didn't realize I didn't know anything.
I guess a few last things to throw in. One is I'll throw in a comment about when the children acquire it at birth, often it can have what's called atypical presentations. They can develop a pneumonia. You can actually get a Trichomonas pneumonitis.
Interesting.
Which is a little bit of a problem. I think we did touch about the fact that we do think that infection with this organism increases your susceptibility to HIV.
Yeah.
Yes.
A physical finding we didn't find in this woman is the famous strawberry cervix. Sometimes when you look, the cervix will actually be irritated. There'll be erythema, redness, and it'll be the strawberry cervix we talk about. And the other, maybe this is a technological improvement. We talked about, wanting to do the wet mount, wanting to be able to go and jump on a microscope. They now have these nucleic acid tests where you can actually just do a swab and you can get back Trichomonas, chlamydia, gonococcus. You can basically do a whole bunch, really through just one little swab, and then it comes back. Because that 10 minutes of running it off, getting it to the microscope in time isn't always available in every lab. So it's nice that technology has come to bear on this.
Not only that, it doesn't rule out those other infections which you have to test for anyway. So this is a good combination. That's really nice.
Where did humans get Trichomonas from? From hominids before them and from monkeys before them? And where did they get it from?
You can go right back.
Turtles all the way down.
Keep going.
That's
Jurassic Park, question. Here we come.
I'm sure there's a little bit of phylogeny on this that might answer that.
Well, flagellates tend to be older evolutionarily than a lot of other things. And Giardia, if you look on the tree of life, as it were, although it's not really a tree of life, is it?
Tree of death.
It's one of the first eukaryotes. But it's a double nucleus.
I presume animals have trichomonads as well.
Oh, trichomonads are all over the place. They're all over the place.
Do we ever acquire animal trichomonas infections?
I have not heard of any, but...
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
See, they're Trichomonas tenax. That's not Trichomonas vaginalis. It's Trichomonas tenax. It lives in the mouth. doesn't cause any disease. It's a commensal. It lives in the pockets, the gingival pockets. Nothing happens. But there have been cases of pneumonia. I guess it's reflux pneumonia. There's a term for it, and I can't remember that right now, but it's when you...
Aspiration pneumonia?
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Some people argue all pneumonia to some degree is aspiration, right? Because you're getting bacteria from, the upper airways. So I should say many people or some people argue that all bacterial, because viral, right? You're not aspirating. Maybe you are aspirating viruses. But
in one of these rare cases, they did find Trichomonas tenax growing to profusion inside of a pocket of a lung, which had, of course, been invaded. So,
right. Have we finished with that, Daniel?
And
we have. I hope people enjoyed that.
Wait. There's more. There's more.
Go ahead.
One of the leading causes of abortion in cattle is due to a trichomonas.
Oh, wow.
So it's not uncommon, and people in the veterinary field know all about this. And so they're.
Is it ever associated with abortions in humans?
I don't recall ever having seen literature on that.
Okay.
The link, this can actually increase your chance of pelvic inflammatory disease. You got all this inflammation. It's also in the same, say risk group.
Yeah. I think the one that causes abortion in cattle is called Trichomonas fetus.
Okay.
This
episode is sponsored by Curiosity Stream, the world's first ad-free non-fiction streaming service. Dickson, you know what a streaming service is?
I do. When you're on the river and you're fishing all day long and someone shows up on horseback with your lunch, that's a streaming service.
I thought it was a feeder stream, Dickson.
Well, no, that's also good. I like that one too. Keep it.
Listen, I've been talking to you about rivers lately. So
We're developing a website, in fact.
Anyway, it's a nonfiction streaming service, which means you go on whatever device, your computer, on the web, Roku, Android, iOS device, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, or Kindle, Apple TV, and you click play, and it streams. It doesn't get downloaded to your computer. It streams, which means coming in over the internet pipes from some other place. Right? It streams. Founded by John Hendricks of Discovery Communications. And we all know Discovery Communications, of course. So you have real science shows, not reality TV shows, which you can find anywhere. It's available in 196 countries. And what they have is a wide variety of science and technology, including nature, history, and much more. Interviews. They have a library, including over 1,500, by the way. It's gone up since we started.
How about that?
Next World, featuring Michio Kaku. Have you ever seen Michio Kaku, Daniel, or Dickson?
I've read his books.
You have?
Yeah. I love his books. Very excellent writer.
I've had lunch with him.
Yes, but I read his books.
Really? Dickson, have you?
I have. I sat right next to him, as a matter of fact, and we had a nice conversation.
Why? About vertical farming?
No. I was talking about vertical farming. He was just talking about the future. And so this was the Science Festival's opening ceremonies at Low Library on the downtown campus.
Yeah.
And it was year one. And I sat next to two people. On one side was Michio Kaku. On the other side was Stephen Chu.
Nice.
So I was surrounded, and they both were fascinated with the concept of a vertical farm. So we had a good time.
Well, they also have, I just went to the site, and here's Michio Kaku snapping his fingers. Yeah. You know how he does that?
Yeah, I do.
You ought to get a meme like that, Dickson. I want to sign in, but all I want to do is search. I don't remember my...
No, Michio, he stretches the boundaries of reality. One of his most infamous statements was that we're all living in a hologram, basically, and this is all virtual space, and nothing is real.
Well, the reason I'm trying to search is because I wanted to see if they have some films on parasites. They have
do.
Viruses, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. They do.
They have a series called Inside the Human Body, Microbirth, Leaps in Evolution. So check it out. You can actually
it's a good
go and look at it.
It's a very good series. I've seen some of them.
It's they have monthly and annual plans starting at $2.99 a month. Just think, you can have a whole month of their content. It's over 50 hours of 4K content, over 1,500 different shows for less than a cup of coffee. Think about that next time you drink coffee. You could be watching a streaming movie from Curiosity
That's a cheap cup
Stream.
of coffee, by the way.
Check out curiositystream.com/microbe and use the promo code microbe during sign-up to get unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series completely free for the first 60 days. That's 2 months free of one of the largest 4K libraries around. Go to curiositystream.com/microbe and use the offer code microbe at sign up. We thank CuriosityStream for their support of TWiP. All right, we have a paper.
A great paper. I love this paper.
You both glommed onto this. I was attracted to it too, but I have some.
It's okay.
Comments.
It's okay to have reservations.
It's not reservations.
It's okay to have comments.
Well, we're going to have a lot of comments.
It's fine. This is a paper in PLOS Pathogens, but who, by the way, sponsored TWiP 400. Did you know that, Dickson and Daniel?
Know that. In fact,
while you were away, by the way, Daniel, we recorded TWiP 400.
So Harold Varmus raised
Harold
his fist.
Varmus.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right here in the library. Yeah. And in the beginning, I was saying this episode is sponsored by PLOS Pathogens. He raised his arm in a fist. And it's on video. We got it, right, Dickson?
Right.
So
right,
PLOS
Dickson?
Pathogens power.
Exactly right.
Well, he was one of the founders of Public Library of Science.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Plant-mediated effects on mosquito capacity to transmit human malaria. This is a study out of Burkina Faso, France, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. Many different institutions.
Do you know where Burkina Faso is?
Exactly, I don't. Why don't you tell us?
It's in southwestern Africa,
Okay.
above the equator.
Above,
Am I right?
I think of it as more as Western. Like, think of
So
Africa
I'm not
as
Western.
a
I
thing
meant
that
Western.
has a thing that sticks out towards us, right?
That's right.
And if you go right south of Mali and just north of Ghana,
Yeah, it's not a big country.
it's
have you gentlemen been?
well, it's landlocked. I can't go there. There's no ocean.
No sailing, no Daniel.
Have you been?
No, but I was invited to a meeting in Kenya once by a couple who worked in Burkina Faso. So that's how I got to know where it is.
I presume they speak French there.
They did.
Because the name of one of the institutes, Institut de Recherche en Sciences de la Santé,
Wow.
is in Burkina Faso.
That's not bad for an Italian.
I took a lot of French in my life. But anyway, this is all about what mosquitoes eat and how it affects their ability to
Exactly.
pick up malaria and have it grow, etc. Now, Dickson,
Yes. Vincent.
mosquitoes, the female mosquito likes to take a blood meal so that it can.
Well, they call it a
eggs.
blood meal. They call it a blood meal.
What's wrong with that?
What they really mean is that the female mosquito needs a high-protein diet in order to produce her eggs, but she doesn't use the blood for her own food.
Use it for the eggs, yeah, right.
But that's
Now-
not food.
What's the food? Tell
Food
us.
is plant juice.
Plant juices.
And they both males and females, both suck plant
Because
juice.
males need food as well.
That's right.
So that juice, those juices that they get by sticking their what into the stem?
proboscis.
Proboscis into the leaves and the stem, or just
That's
the stem would it be, Dickson?
They pick out various parts. In fact, if there's rotting fruit, they'll go right on to
The
that.
fruit, they pick up some sap. And so just give me an idea, Dickson. What percentage of the time are they doing that as
That's a very
opposed
good
to
question.
seeking blood?
Well, the male doesn't.
Male doesn't. So he's always on the plants drinking.
Always on the
100%
plants
for the
drinking.
males.
So they spend their day drinking sap.
That's right. As Bob Gouache used to say, the
And
male
since you are what you drink,
the male of the species is the hippie of the group because he's always drinking from the flowers. This was a 1960s reference, of course. The female mosquito also needs nutrition, and so they both feed on similar plants. Okay, so when I was at Notre Dame, they had a colony of Aedes aegypti. So how do you feed them? You don't put your arm over the cage and let them suck your blood. That's how you get the more mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you feed them every day?
Yes.
And the apple slices.
Apple slices?
Yeah,
really?
they just take the apple slices and they cut them
Put them in the cage?
little wedges and they stuck them on the top of the
and the
cage.
mosquitoes will go on.
And
to
they would
them.
go up there periodically and suck the juices.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that's what they fed them.
They could also give them a solution of 5% glucose, right?
They can do that through a membrane, and then they can collect saliva. And
So what is it in the plant juices that they...
We're going to talk about that because there's a lot of things.
Well, they
about
don't
plant
actually...
juice.
They don't know because they haven't looked at it here. But what do you know what it is in the plant juice that they want? Is it the carbohydrate? Is there something else? It's mostly sugar in plant juices, though,
Well,
right?
yes, but I can't imagine any organism doing everything just with glucose unless it's a chemosynthetic autotroph, and these are not chemosynthetic autotrophs.
So here's what I know. Yeah, that's a good point because aphids, same thing. They drink sap, which only has carbohydrates. So what they do is they have bacteria in there,
Well, they have a microbiome.
in them, which are endosymbionts that
Exactly.
make amino acids.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So I assume that mosquitoes must have to do a similar thing because they can't get everything they
have a huge gene microbiome.
So the question here is whether what kind of plants the mosquitoes feed on, whether that affects their ability to carry malaria.
That's what they were, and they did a lot of peridomestic plants because
What is peridomestic, Dickson?
Peridomestic means it grows next to where we live. So domestic is us. We domesticate wildlife and we make them into food plants and stuff like this, right?
Okay.
So in their native habitats that they're investigating in Burkina Faso, there are lots of villages. Mm-hmm. And some villages, cultivate this kind of crop and some cultivate that kind of crop. Right. And that's how this study, I think, was originally couched.
So they looked at 4 different plants, 2 flowering ornamentals.
That's right.
Thevechia nerifolia and Barlaria lupina. These are from Burkina Faso.
They are native plants. That's correct.
And then 2 fruits. Mango.
I wouldn't say that they're all native.
They're not native?
Get back to that. We'll get back.
Okay.
They were they may not be native.
Shall I jump in and say
collected in the gardens?
Yeah, so the Thevechia is commonly known as yellow oleander. It's actually a New World plant that was brought
all
to.
right.
Yeah.
And then the Malaria is originally from Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And
so
they use it there as like a local healer for dog bites, snake bites.
So they just collected these locally, but they probably were important.
But they grow.
Right?
They all grow locally. I mean, the one thing that's local is the fruit, the Linnea.
What is that?
Microcarpa.
Anyway?
It's a West African tree. It has these small fruits.
Okay.
That turn red after a while.
Is the mango native?
No. The mango is originally from the Bangladesh-Pakistan region, and then it's been cultivated throughout Southeast Asia, way back. Wasn't brought to Africa until the 16th century.
Interesting.
But it's taken off in Africa.
So they pick these because they're widely distributed in Burkina Faso, and they have seen mosquitoes resting on them and eating. And these mosquitoes are different from anything we've talked about. Dickson, right? It's a different species of mosquitoes.
Yeah, which one is it?
Anopheles coluzzi.
So what do you think it was named after?
Italian mosquito, coluzzi.
Well, coluzzi is a malariologist.
Don't make fun of Italians.
I live in New Jersey. Would I ever do that? What are you, crazy? So this guy Coluzzi, he works at the University of Rome.
This guy Coluzzi.
And you got a problem with that? And he's widely known for his work on malaria throughout sub-Saharan Africa as well.
So
they named a mosquito after him.
What is the importance of Anopheles coluzzi?
Well, Anopheles coluzzi is one of the dominant vectors in Burkina Faso.
Is it flat?
Well, no, they have an angle when they land, so that you can tell them apart from culicine.
They're culicines.
Of course, there are tons of culicines as well as anophelines. Yeah.
And what does Aedes fall into?
It's a culicine.
Culicine, so it's at an angle.
No, it's flat. The anopheles is at an angle.
Yeah. It's a nice name, Anopheles.
I like it, actually.
I do like it. And it's known to carry Plasmodium falciparum, correct?
It carries malaria for humans.
Burkina Faso, it's the main malaria vector.
Correct.
The main Anopheles that carries it.
Do they have a big problem there with malaria?
They have a problem. I'm not sure it's so big because Coluzzi is a pretty modern malariologist, and they just named this dominant species after him, so it must have taken some time to figure all this out.
So the way they did this is they actually put the flowers in the cage.
Right.
They put them in bundles and they wrapped them in moistened paper towels, blah, blah, blah. They cut up the fruits. So they don't actually know where the mosquito is drinking from.
And they don't know what's in the stuff that they're drinking. Yes. That's one of the biggest problems. And they do go into that, by the way. I don't say that they're not unaware of that at all. They are totally aware of that.
Yes. So this is a rather crude experiment by throwing mosquitoes in a cage with pieces of plants or fruits, but that's a beginning.
Yeah, but they got a result. That was the even more incredible finding, is that they actually found some differences.
Right, so they did a number of experiments to see the effect of having these mosquitoes feed on these 4 sources, and another one was glucose, 5% glucose.
Yeah, that was
solution.
the control.
That's the control, right?
Control, yeah.
And the first thing they do...
But wait a minute.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Glucose is not a normal sugar in plants, is it?
Good point, Dickson.
Fructose is the normal sugar in plants.
So shouldn't that be the
disaccharides?
control?
Yeah, I.
Well, maybe they just
confused over that one too.
Well, if you give them fructose, maybe they wouldn't see any difference.
Well, I want to see that then. Show me.
They should have included that. I agree.
Should have.
But if you compare to glucose, if glucose is not in a plant, that's good because then you can see the effect of whatever is in the plant. But I agree they should have had fructose.
They should have.
That's
pure fructose, though.
Pure fructose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would have liked to see, to criticize the paper. Though I love it, remember?
Of course.
What was the thing that you said we got for this paper? We were all excited about it. There was some phrase you used. Anyway, it would have been nice to have fructose, and also it would have been nice to have the mango in both figures, because they do the first figure, and then they change it out. What did they took the African flowering tree out and, don't have it in the neck. I'd like to see all four in each, just consistency, because it does sound like they did it sequentially. So it would be nice to say, this is what we're going to do. And, and I think there's a big thing with let's use fruit.
I would look at this as a preliminary finding, to be honest. Okay. This is a pilot study.
Well, the first thing they look at is, and in fact, this is open access so everyone can see it. Figure 1 is the effect of sugar treatment on the early development of P. falciparum and survival and fecundity of malaria-exposed mosquitoes. What is fecundity, Dickson?
Their ability to reproduce.
To make eggs, right?
Yeah, they want to make eggs.
One panel, they show the infection rate compared with glucose, B. lupulina, M. indica, 10, all the plants, the two plants and the two fruits, although they're missing one here.
But what they're saying is they can't just produce eggs because of the plant juices they ingest, right? They have to drink blood. They have to suck blood. So they feed them the juice first.
Yes,
and then they let them bite on a host.
Yeah.
And then they go back to the same juice again. And then they measure the eggs produced.
Yeah. I thought that was the neat part in the methods.
I like that.
Like they get a whole bunch of volunteers with a certain level of gametocytes, right? In there, because you got to have the sexual form, and then they let these mosquitoes feed.
These are humans.
On these humans.
These are
these volunteers.
Humans. But these are lab-raised mosquitoes, so they're pretty sure they don't have.
They're looking at hundreds of mosquitoes here.
Yeah.
For glucose 259, etc. So
I hope they got paid, right? Per bite or something. I don't know.
So there are differences, right? The infection rate, which they define as the proportion of mosquitoes exposed to a blood meal that has at least one oocyst in their midgut. Right. Glucose is at a certain level. Then the plants, they either stimulate or they inhibit the infection rate. Mm-hmm. Although the differences are small.
Well, it depends which figures we're looking at, right? I mean, the initial infection and the infection intensity are pretty darn small.
So in infection intensity, that is the mean of number of developing oocysts in the guts, as opposed to harboring at least one. So you see, again, glucose is the highest, and all the plants inhibit that, with M. indica the most, but it goes from 8 to 2, 8 oocysts to 2.
Yeah, those are low numbers.
They are low.
Panel C was interesting, survivorship.
Very interesting.
So the M. indica really inhibits the survivorship, which is survival of malaria-exposed mosquito with each sugar treatment. So that's whether they live or not, right?
Yeah, and that was a big difference. I mean, we have about 95% for every other, say, food source, sugar source, except for the flowering African fruit tree.
Exactly.
And that's down at like 55. So that was, as we pointed out, that's the one that's indigenous to the region. Mm. So we've actually brought in non-indigenous flowers and fruit trees that seem to actually be beneficial as far as survivorship of mosquitoes that become infected with
So it's not unusual to find plants that produce insecticide-like qualities.
Sure.
Because pyrethrum comes from the chrysanthemum, for instance, and that sort of thing. So, so plants have natural defense mechanisms, and their chemistry has been selected for by their predators. And it's not unusual to find a result like this. But so, how would you use it? The point is that once you know,
the thing is, Dickson, in the wild, maybe the mosquitoes would not ever bite these.
Exactly
plants,
right. Well, that's another thing. Of course,
you could replace everything with this, and maybe they say.
That's right. But remember, then they wouldn't be important vectors of disease either because nobody lives there.
Yeah. Could we get rid of all the plants and replace them with this M. indica? Probably not, right?
Probably
not.
Not.
And remember, the survival is not 0. There's still 50%, and that might be enough.
And there's no way to eliminate the diversity of plants.
But maybe in your house you could plant Here's a question, Dickson.
Okay.
Do these mosquitoes bite you in your home? Because Aedes do, I know
If
that.
you're sleeping with your windows open, the answer is yes.
So, if they need blood, they're not going to, even if you fill your room with plants, they're still going to go to you.
They're not going to not feed on you because
However,
they need to eat.
So the point would be that if you want, you could have these anti-mosquito plants in your room, but if they need a blood meal.
Right.
Yeah.
They need a warm body.
They need you. Now, of course, it could decrease.
Yeah, but I think where they're trying to go, and I like this, is that you just have to jump to the next figure because they don't have the mangoes here. But, we talked about the fact that mangoes started right in the Bangladesh, Pakistan area. And then a couple thousand years ago, they moved them to Southeast Asia, so they're all over there. And then 1600s, they moved them to Africa. And that looks like the best food source if you're a mosquito that wants to spread malaria. So it sort of becomes an argument when we're introducing new crops, new fruit trees or flowering plants to different regions. Do we want to start thinking about the fact that it may have a major impact upon a disease like malaria?
I have a question for Vincent.
What do I know about this?
You're sitting at your computer, though, and you can check this answer. How many different varietals of mango are there?
You want me to check?
Yeah.
All right.
Because I'm sure you're going to get surprised out of this one.
So are you thinking that there may be certain mangoes that may be,
I mean, you've done enough traveling, and so have I, and I know Vincent has too. You go to the outdoor markets and you see all these different kinds of wonderful mangoes. Like Mexico has these wonderful little yellow mangoes that are absolutely fantastic. Hundreds.
And they're very pretty. Look.
Hundreds. They're gorgeous.
Yellow, green, orange,
gorgeous.
red. Wow, I didn't realize there was
see?
I'm not a big mango fan.
Oh, I love mango. Oh, man. Some of those bigger green mangoes. Oh, no. You have to let it ripen. Come on. I'll bring one in for you. I'll bring a ripe one in for you.
You bring it in. You cut it.
No problem.
I'm not doing all that ripping and
No. You don't have to.
Big goddamn pit that's in each one.
I've got the method. You know what? You want to see something really a riot? Give that big pit that's not fully cleaned off.
Yeah.
Give it to a little baby and watch them go to town.
They like it?
They love it. They just keep slipping out of their hands.
You like mangoes, Daniel?
It's not my favorite.
I like mangoes. I'm partial to mangoes.
So this second figure, the effect of sugar treatments on sporozoite index, which is the proportion of mosquitoes exposed to a blood meal and having disseminated sporozoites in their head and thoraces. Okay, so that's actual infection of the mosquito.
Yeah, and we should probably mention the sporozoites. That's the stage of the malaria parasite that's infectious to us, to humans.
Okay,
right.
So glucose is at a certain level, 0.4, and then all the two treatments increase it, the microcarpa and the lupulina. They increase it, and then the nerifolia keeps it the same.
Yeah, so it's the introduced mango.
It does better.
And the introduced flower does better. And then, you stick with the New World yellow oleander. It doesn't make it worse. That one's,
And also, those two also increase survivor of the mosquitoes as well, shown in the next graph. As well. So
mosquitoes live longer. They've got more stages of the parasites that are infectious to us. And
they have another figure on effect on longevity. And so this M. indica, it decreases substantially the longevity, which just means how long the mosquitoes live, Dickson?
Sure. Well, average is a week and a half. So this decreases them down to a week. I don't know.
Yeah, they go from 20 days to about 9 days, it looks like.
That's, more than a 50% reduction.
Sure. It probably doesn't give them chance to bite twice. And
that could be a big issue.
You cannot transmit malaria unless you bite twice.
So they actually use these numbers to make epidemiological predictions.
Yeah, I saw that too. Right? That was a hypothetical.
Like what size outbreak if you fed mosquitoes.
It was very interesting, yeah.
On glucose, you would have 70. What is that number? 70 what? It's just 70. And then, these plants would increase it to 90 or 100. And then the nerifolia would bring it down to 50. So it decreases it substantially. Yeah. Theoretically, but who knows, right?
Right.
There's so many variables there of whether they would eat this at all and so forth. So Dickson, what are your caveats here besides the ones?
Well, it was their caveats too, because they fully admit that there are lots of other biologically active substances in plant juices besides their sugars. So it's possible that there's another effect here that they're looking at rather than the sugar effect. Terpenes and all kinds of complicated plant products.
These oleanders are poisonous, right? You're not supposed to eat one.
Well, that's for humans.
Who knows about mosquitoes?
Maybe not for mosquitoes, So is lily of the valley. I mean, you can look at a whole bunch of ways of analyzing this, but until they break those plants down into their components and start figuring out which of the components actually does what they're measuring, then they're sort of shooting in the dark.
But they suggest that at the end, maybe we should plant lots of T.
No, you can't make that conclusion. Not based on this evidence.
Could we do a trial and plant tons of this and then see in a year whether there's been a decrease?
Sure.
We could, but I don't think that's going to work.
You see, fostering the planting of species such as T.
negativity.
which is commonly used by mosquito and which negatively affects vectorial capacity, may locally reduce malaria transmission. That is a non-invasive control approach. It's sort of like putting screens on your windows.
Yeah, I know that, but try to do this in a tropical climate with lots of invasives that are all over the place. It's very difficult.
Now, your idea to identify the compound is important if you want to use that. But if you just want to plant plants, why do you have to identify what's the active ingredients, right?
Well, I don't know of one instance where they've planted plants, including chrysanthemums, that have actually worn.
What are those for? Chrysanthemums. What do they keep away?
They make pyrethrum with it.
They keep insects away.
They produce a natural insecticide that's short-lived that's very good for like one-day spraying and stuff like this.
Is there something you can plant to keep the deer away?
He asked quizzically.
Every night I come home and the deer chewing on my
I wish they had an essence of grizzly bear that you could
have deer on Long Island?
Are you kidding?
We have a few. 1,000.
Like per square mile.
Exactly.
So the other night, we have now this summer, a mother and two babies, all right?
Yeah.
And they're always chewing on our front lawn. I told my wife, scare them away. She said, I don't want them to run in the street and get killed. I said, okay, then you're going to lose your...
Why do you think the car insurance is so high in New Jersey? Because of the accidents that people have.
They just run in the street. They don't look both ways.
No, they don't. Why should they? It's not their world.
They're confused.
It's not their world. Yeah, they are confused.
Anyway, so you think in the long term, planting is not going to make any difference?
This study is in the short term. The long term is to examine what components from these are important, and if it's a non-toxin,
what would you do with that?
Well,
spray it?
Possibly.
Okay.
Use it as a residual toxic substance on the windowsills. If you have to sleep with your windows open, you don't have screens. Mosquitoes land on it, they die.
Go back to DDT.
Bob Glotz would agree with you. Domestic home spraying with DDT is not wrong. But using it to the point of making all the insects resistant to it because it was misused is why we find ourselves in a
had a problem on birds, right? It made their eggs fragile and all that.
Exactly right.
But inside
that too, but no, that's when they sprayed it outside.
Yeah.
We're not saying to spray it outside. We're saying use it as a residual spray on the inside, and it's.
I don't think it will, but it will happen.
No, but in regions where the insects are resistant, it doesn't work.
So here's my idea, because I like planting flowers.
Here we go.
So we know the flight distance of all these different anopheles, and the Kaluzi fortunately has a reasonably short flight distance, like 4 to 5 kilometers. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you take one region, you say in this 4 to 5 kilometer area, no mangoes. We're going to plant these yellow oleanders, right? You do it in a residential area. You say in this is going to be our pilot study. So we do whatever we normally do, but in this area we now go in. We spend. How many are you going to spend to buy a bunch of these flowers and plant them in this section? And then you just observe for a year or two. Very inexpensive. You're paying for flowers. And we'll know that, theoretically, within the sort of center of this district, the food source will be these flowers. And outside this zone, we'll have, whatever they want to do. And you look, and it's not polluting the water. You don't have toxic chemicals.
Sounds like a wonderful idea.
So, Daniel,
and it'll be beautiful. Because they're like yellow, beautiful flowers blooming.
How long do they stay blooming?
I think they're year-round bloomer, actually, the yellow oleander.
They stay bloomed the entire year?
I think you say that with like a lack of
authority.
Let's check. I mean, we have the all-knowing internet.
That's right.
But while he's looking that up, you would have to check everyone by taking their blood and looking for malaria.
Well, there's a season for malaria.
There's an invasive aspect of this study.
Yeah. You've got a lot of
summer to fall. So we need to time it with the malaria. With the malaria.
Daniel, do you want to?
It's like half the year.
Do you want to do this study? I bet the Gates Foundation.
I want to do this study. Wouldn't this be
Write
awesome?
a proposal.
The only problem is it's Burkina Faso. It's landlocked. I can't go there.
Okay.
There are no rivers that lead to the ocean.
But Ghana has, Ghana's right on the coast, and it's got that wonderful lake system.
Oh, that's
Maybe we could do this in northern Ghana.
All right.
My big question to you is the Johnny Appleseed of Africa is, what are the seasons for transmission from malaria?
So it's interesting because I was, in my naivete years ago, I thought like the rainy season was the rainy season.
No.
But different parts of Africa have different rainy seasons.
That's true.
And it really, early in the rainy season is when you have the most, because that's when, we think the mosquitoes have this 20-day lifespan.
That's right.
And then it actually fades off as the rainy season is ending. So it corresponds to the rainy season, but it's front-loaded. And then the rainy season is variable in different parts of Africa. So you got to know your regional rainy season.
Very true. And then there are species of anophelines that breed in the water that the hoofs of cattle make going to and from water sources.
Yeah, of course.
Try to interfere with that one.
I still remember a conversation I had in Africa where I was talking to someone about, the States, and he's like, "Oh, when is your rainy season?" And I thought about it. I was like, well, we don't really think of it that way. We think of it as like summer and winter.
Yeah, but if you were from Arizona, you could say exactly when. They have a monsoon.
Huh.
They actually have a monsoon. In fact, they're in it right now, and you can read about all those in Tucson. They had a huge flood about a week ago where people had to be pulled out of their cars, and lots of rain that comes up out of the Gulf every summer. They can count on it.
Wow.
So that's a monsoon. We have a monsoon in this country. But we don't have malaria associated with it.
Speaking of monsoons, Daniel, do you have another case for us?
Oh, I do.
Okay. But by the way, I don't mean to bash this study at all. I say, great idea, wonderful thought process. Take it to the next step.
Yeah, I'm sure they would like to.
And if you guys are listening, the authors are listening, they want me to go plant flowers in West Africa, give me a call.
Dickson, you want to help?
Any trout streams in Burkina Faso?
Horizontal farming.
Right.
All right, I'm ready.
All right.
Lay it on us.
I got it.
Are you guys are all ready?
Oh, I knew you'd say that.
Okay. This is a story of a 12-year-old boy who was brought to the hospital by his parents with severe headache, stiff neck, fever, and a decreased level of alertness.
Severe headache,
stiff neck, fever, and decreased level of alertness.
Okay.
This is an emergency admit, I take it.
True. He came to the emergency department. The parents report that the child has been healthy with no prior medical problems. No one else in the family is ill. There's no reported rash, no other symptoms, no diarrhea, no trouble breathing, nothing. Just what I've described. This occurred in the summer, and the boy's been engaged in usual summertime activities with his friends. He plays football. That's soccer to the Americans in our audience. He likes to swim in, the warm, fresh water with his friends. He likes playing outside, normal summer kid activities.
Right.
They're concerned. What you guys are? The patient undergoes a lumbar puncture.
Poor kid.
And so that's where they put a needle. They're getting a sampling of the cerebral spinal fluid for testing. And they immediately start this child on meningitis treatment because of the presentation. They've got him on ceftriaxone, vancomycin, ampicillin. I'm going to give you guys a little more information. As mentioned, past medical history is negative, no surgeries. He's not allergic to anything. In his family, there's a family history of high blood pressure and diabetes. He's not on any medications. He attends school, but it's summer, so he's not attending school. He lives with his family, so mom, dad, and he's got a couple brothers. He doesn't use any substances or drugs or anything. 12, young
Guess
kid.
He's not sexually active either.
We don't have a report of being sexually active.
What's the locale? New York area?
So that's, I'm going to leave that vague because I'm going to say, because I'm going to say this is an illness that is not geographically limited. This could be Virginia, it could be Georgia, it could be Florida, it could be Missouri,
Australia.
It could be Australia, it could be Thailand. This is a disease that occurs throughout the world.
Bath, England.
All right, now, has he had any bug bites?
Yes. He has had lots of mosquito bites.
And what species?
Well, Long Island,
what
you
plants?
have your choice.
No, that's good. I asked the parents that, and they just looked at me dumb about it. No.
You didn't collect all of them,
Which
but
species? No, but I tried to help them. I'm like, and the mosquitoes, when they were about to bite your son, were they at an angle? Was it an acute? No, they, lots and lots of mosquitoes. Yeah, it's summer. The kids out there getting bug bites. People have dogs, so don't forget dog exposure. I want to bring that up.
When did the symptoms first start?
It was pretty acute onset, according to the parents. He was
day before?
Yeah, just a day or two before.
And what was he doing the day before?
Normal summer stuff.
Normal summer stuff?
Yeah.
You said
kicking the ball around, going swimming, playing with his buddies.
Swimming
In a pool or a water hole,
So not in pools, just out in like lakes.
Yep.
Got it.
Warm, fresh water.
That's what you said. Warm, fresh water.
Warm, fresh water.
Not a pool. And what has he eaten anything unusual lately? What does he eat?
He eats the normal stuff that his family eats. So nothing special,
And they cook their food.
The food is cooked.
There was no other admits along this line in recent past?
No, see, he has been healthy up until now.
I don't mean with him. I mean with other children.
No. You mean like other kids coming in with headaches, fevers, and stiff necks? Sure.
Correct.
Not like any sort of major clustering, but yeah, I mean, there have been other admissions.
Did you say anything about? He's got fever, right?
So I'll give you his exam too. He has a documented temperature of 39.4 C. So that's pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
His blood pressure is a little bit low. His heart rate is increased. He's breathing rapidly. He's on exam. He's got decreased level of responsiveness. He's got a stiff neck. He looks ill, but his exam is non-focal, so we're not seeing any asymmetrical movements or any asymmetrical strength. I'm going to even give you a few more bits of information. His white blood cell count is elevated, and it's neutrophil predominant, so it's got that left shift that we talk about, and he is completely eosinopenic. There are no eosinophils noted. So the CSF, I'm going to give you some information there.
Please do.
The glucose is low. The cells are increased. They do stains. Cells are increased. They do negative stains for bacteria, fungi, and acid-fast bacilli. Cultures have all been sent.
CT scan?
And so the CT scan is showing diffuse swelling of the brain.
Nothing specific.
Nothing specific. And the patient is doing poorly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give a final sort of, I'll call it a hint, sort of a morbid hint. But I actually discussed this case with the pathologist. So we could sort of see where this is heading. This is not going to have a good outcome.
Not good.
Too bad.
Which is somewhat, unfortunately, typical of this diagnosis.
This child was not verbose when he came in?
No.
No.
12-year-old, huh?
12-year-olds.
You have any other questions, Dickson? You know what's going on?
I think I do.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
I'm always ready to be fooled.
So the things to think about, right? The dog exposure. Right? He's had a lot of dog exposure. He's got some sort of a neurological issue where we talk about he had a poor outcome.
No rashes.
No rashes.
No rashes.
No rashes.
And this is somewhat of a timely case.
You
if
didn't
people have
say
been
where
watching
this
the
case is
news.
from, so we can't really try to geographically rule in or out certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Can happen.
Doesn't matter. It happens all over.
It happens all over.
Okay,
We did say in the CSF that there were elevated white cells, but I will say there were no eosinophils in the CSF. So this is not an eosinophilic meningitis.
Any strange cells that couldn't be identified?
Oh, interesting. Interesting that you bring that up. That's my response.
That's a good response.
Okay. I'm good.
I'm fine.
Okay.
All right. I think people should be able to get that. I also want to tell you about our other sponsor of this episode before we read you a couple of email. And this one, Dickson will recognize. Drobo.
Absolutely. I
Remember
just used
Drobo?
mine yesterday.
Drobo is a company that makes storage solutions.
And they're good.
They make a family of safe and expandable storage solutions. So we want to welcome Drobo back because they did advertise many years ago on TWiP. And during that time, Dickson, you got a unit to play with, right?
I didn't just play with it. I use it.
And you use it to this day.
I do. I store all of my visuals on it.
So Drobo is a storage unit that you attach to your computer that is designed to solve two problems that affect hard disk drive. First, they get full, and second, they fail.
Exactly.
And Drobo solves both problems. They are expandable. So they're basically black boxes and you can slide in hard drives. And they have different capacities from 5 up to 12. And let's say you start with 2. The software on the Drobo, which is a special kind of RAID software, will make one big drive out of them. And when you copy, you plug it into your computer or your network, and as you copy data to it, it duplicates it across this storage array. And so if one of those 2 drives failed, you could just pull it out and put a new one in, and the data would be duplicated back onto it. And you can have 5. You could put, if you have a 5-unit storage Drobo, you could put 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 drives in. Doesn't matter. So you can expand it as you need it. It will tell you how much data are on your drives. There are lights on the front.
They're fun to watch. They are. It's
green.
like watching E.T.
When it's green, it means you have space. When it's orange, it means it's getting full. You should consider buying another drive, and then you put another drive in, and it goes back to green. When it turns red, you're out of space. Exactly. So, Dickson, if you can interpret a traffic light, you can use your Drobo. And you say you got it, right? You can.
I will never fill mine up, but that's okay.
I know that Dickson is not technologically savvy, right?
I'm intermediate. I can muddle my way through.
So you set it up on your own, right?
No, you did it.
I did it for you.
You came over and you did it.
I want to make sure you had it right. So also,
have you seen the John McEnroe ad for technologically ungifted people?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's very funny because he's trying to plug something in his home. It's an electronic piece of equipment. And the technician at the other end says, use your iPhone, and then you can use it as a camera, and then I can tell what's on it. And he says, you mean you can see clearly what's in and out? And of course, he's a tennis player.
Right.
So he used to argue about
it's
that.
very simple to use. It's expandable. It knows how much data are on your drives. It's redundant because it duplicates the data. You can have 1 or 2 drives fail, and it doesn't matter. You just put a new drive in, and it duplicates all the data. And it's simple. If you can read a traffic light, you can use it. And they have a whole family of products, 8 different products, and which one you get depends on what you want to do. They have products for photographers. If you want to go out in the field, they have a portable Drobo Mini. If you need a lot of storage, if you need a big bucket, they have up to 12 bay units. They also have one, they just sent me one, which is a networked storage unit. You don't plug it into your computer, you plug it into your network. And I would like to use it here to store data in the lab.
Why
and then
not?
many people can share it in my lab.
Do they let you do that here at Columbia? They seem very...
So that is the key, Daniel. I'm in the process of doing that. Because if you're home, you have a router, plug computers into it, and it automatically gets a local IP address. And if you plugged your Drobo, that's what would happen. We don't have routers here. We're not allowed to have them.
That's right.
Because you have to, every computer or network attached storage, which is what this is, has to be registered with the university. So I'm in the process of doing that. Okay. And then you could get an IP address for it, and then you could plug it in, and then you could restrict who gets access to it so that not everybody sees
Keep it secure.
So I'm doing that, and I'm going to relay my experience over the next few weeks. Anyway, for everybody that uses a computer and needs storage, needs to have it secure and backed up, Drobo is good for you. You should check out drobo.com for information on their models. And if you want to buy, go to drobostore.com. If you use the discount code microbe100, you get $100 off. You get it? Microbe 100, $100 off.
Got it.
Purchase of a Drobo Mini, Drobo 5D, 5N, or any 8 or 12 drive system. Boy, I'd like to have a 12 drive system.
Yes, you would. Yes. Gee, and if it doesn't make any noise, what good is it, right?
I'm not going to get a 12 drive system because, the thing is you still have to back it up. Remember, this is a lovely self-contained thing, but if you drop the whole thing into a bucket of water and you don't have a backup, you're kind of in trouble.
That's true.
So you really should get two and back one up to the other.
Good Lord.
But not everyone does that. I actually have two right down there because of that. I had one and I had some problems, so I got another one to back it up.
Do not put them above buckets of water.
No.
Yes.
So, your house could burn down, etc. You should always have off-site. Or you don't have to buy two. What you could do is
What the cloud is all
you
about?
could have your Drobo at home and then have it backed up to the cloud so that you have off-site storage. Anyway,
I knew that.
Drobo.com, drobostore.com. Use the discount code Microbe100 to get $100 off. We thank Drobo for their support of the Microbe TV podcasts. Thank you, Drobo. And now we have a few emails. This first one I found had been languishing for a while, and I think Daniel should read it.
Sure. Joanne Wiley writes, "Hello, Daniel, Vincent, and Paul.
Apparently I wasn't there.
You weren't there. The case of the 4-year-old boy was incredibly tough because the presentation and social history was so nonspecific. There seemed to be two ways to go about trying to figure this out. But of course, we have the distinct advantage that the case was presented on TWiP, not TWiB, TWiF, or TWiV. First, we can assume that without eosinophilia, it's probably a protozoan. Because the child had no travel history, one could list common protozoan parasites in the Northeast. Pretty short list that starts with waterborne protozoa like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, etc. Definitely not a fit. But then moves on to Babesia microti. Aha! Or you can start with pulmonary edema and not much else, which also led me to Babesia. This protozoan is transmitted by the Ixodes tick, the same tick that transmits the Lyme disease pathogen Borrelia burgdorferi, which is endemic, if not epidemic, in the Northeast. So if I am correct, we can hope the little boy is suffering only from babesiosis, not babesiosis plus Lyme. Babesiosis can run the spectrum of asymptomatic to full-blown crises, like the Indian gentleman with 25% parasitemia you reviewed recently. Babesia infection is especially dangerous in patients who are asplenic or functionally asplenic, for example, due to sickle cell disease. Babesia can be diagnosed by blood smear. One would look for the Maltese cross merozoites in RBCs. Treatment for adults is with an anti-malaria like atovaquone plus a protein synthesis inhibitor like azithromycin or clindamycin. No clue if it is the same for our little kid. But this brings me to a question for Dickson. Both Plasmodium and Babesia are susceptible to some degree to bacterial protein synthesis inhibitors. I've always assumed that is because they target the ribosomes in the apicoplast and mitochondria, but I can find only a few papers that actually test this idea. So I was wondering if Dickson had some greater understanding of this phenomenon that he could share.
Well, I don't share.
It is, if nothing else, a great example of the endosymbiotic theory of organelle origin. Thanks for the great podcast. My soon-to-be second-year students at Hofstra Northwell School of Medicine will be listening all summer long. At least they better be. Best wishes, Joe, Yosef's former ID professor. So I really hope I got this right, or my credibility is shot.
Well, I wish
you don't have any clue.
I wish I could be of help here, but I have no data that could contribute to this argument.
What do you think, Daniel, about this?
I mean, it's an interesting idea. I mean, we do know that things like azithromycin, right, are going to target the ribosomes. It's sort of the protein, but whether they also have, targeting of the apicoplast, I don't know. But it's very interesting.
You know that azithromycin inhibits Zika virus?
Really?
It's an off-target effect, obviously, but
how about that?
It's quite interesting.
That is interesting.
Well, clindamycin acts slowly, but it is an antimalarial. So they give that along with artemisinin or with quinine as a beginner, and then eventually just switch them over to clindamycin as the final way of cleaning up the parasites. So maybe you can inhibit their ribosomes. They have ribosomes. They have protein synthesis. They're, normal, just like everybody else. So why not? So
this is funny because Yosef, we get lots of emails from Yosef.
We do.
Yeah, now we got an
one
email
from
from
his
his
teacher.
So
teacher.
it's good. They're all listening out there.
Yeah, so Joe, you'll have to let us know what your last name is, so we can run across you
right.
if I'm ever out there.
Right.
Dickson, can you take the one from Steve, please?
I would love to. Hi, Vincent, Dickson, and Daniel. Thought you might find this recent case study on movement north and hybridization of schistosomes towards Europe. I don't think we have to worry about wild swimming too much in the UK yet, though. Incidentally, I think I inadvertently solved the current TWiP case in listening to Dickson picking an early house episode to pieces in one of your early tapeworm podcasts. I won't count that as a personal score, though. Would be interested to hear more of parasitism beyond the field of human diseases, too. I think that Dickson does have the natural history and ecological experience to branch out more, and bringing in the recent penguin case was a good idea, but the insect and plant world has its important parasitic relationships, too. Mind you, going back over the podcast, I get the impression that we have still barely scratched the surface on the human parasites, however long the episode. Many thanks, Steve from England.
By the way, the previous letter from Joe was about the penguin.
Yeah, I remember.
Right.
And we were, of course, vague about the 4-year-old because the 4-year-old was a penguin.
Well,
So I thought he really thought it well through, like going through the lack of eosinophilia and focusing on the protozoan. And if we had actually told him we were dealing with a penguin, I think he would have.
Tell him which protozoans do elicit eosinophilia.
Oh, Cytoisospora belli.
Exactly.
And
there was one other.
There is another.
Well, I think it's a.
We'll remember. We'll bring it. I joke that this is like I can always like be given the parasite. I could say the eosinophilia, but if you ask me the other, like make a list, I'm like my brain doesn't work that way.
By the way, this is a very cool paper he sent in Lancet Infectious Diseases. It's called "Outbreak of Urogenital Schistosomiasis in Corsica," and there was an outbreak in the summer of 2013 in Corsica. Over 120 local people or tourists were infected. So they did a really broad investigation. They did parasitological and surveys at 9 sites of infections. They got snails from the environment. They identified 2 main infection foci along the Kavu River with many snails found in both locations. They recovered 3,544 snails. None were naturally infected, but laboratory-based infections confirmed their susceptibility. They characterized 73 eggs from 12 patients, and basically they find the freshwater swimming pools of the river harbor many snails which can transmit the schistosomes. Our data, they did some sequencing, suggests that the parasites were imported into Corsica by individuals infected in West Africa, specifically Senegal.
Interesting.
Hybridization between Schistosoma hematobium and the cattle schistosome S. bovis had a role in this outbreak, showing how easily and rapidly urogenital schistosomiasis can be introduced and spread into novel areas where the right snails, these are Bulinus snails, are endemic.
So this is S. hematobium?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Goodness.
S. hematobium. Actually, they are hybrids. S. hematobium, S. bovis hybrids. They're
Wow.
hybrids.
That's
Hybrids.
really bizarre.
They've mated.
That's bizarre.
Bizarre. It's in France. Cool article.
So Dientomoeba fragilis and Sarcocystis hominis.
There you go. There you
The
go.
other two.
There you go. There you go.
120 cases. All right, thank you. And the last is from Anthony. He sends us an article from Eureka Alert. And this is ancient feces provides earliest evidence of infectious disease being carried on the Silk Road.
Right.
They found that eggs from 4 species of worms were present: roundworms, Ascaris, Trichuris, Taenia, and Clonorchis.
Right.
And
So
based on the current prevalence of the Chinese liver fluke, its closest endemic area, it had a latrine. That's what they dug up here along the Silk Road. And they got these things from it. Yes, Dickson, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to add to this discussion with the fact that I just ran across an article, I hope it wasn't here because then my mind is really going, that showed how people took care of their personal hygiene after defecation.
How's that, Dickson?
They took long bamboo sticks and they wrapped silk around it, and then they used that as toilet paper. And they found
Show me.
Really? You up for this?
Here's a pen. That big enough?
All right, guys.
So they can sample these leavings.
How long
as
were
they
the sticks? 6 feet?
No, they were shorter than that.
That's interesting. They can sample these sticks and see what they're...
And then they can see the residues on the sticks, and that's where they found these.
Well, this discovery provides the first evidence for long-distance travel with an infectious disease along the Silk Road. How about that? Oh, Dickson.
Yes.
They have a picture, 2,000-year-old personal hygiene sticks with remains of cloth.
In this article, this is where I did see it.
That's where they got
So I'm losing my mind, basically.
Yeah, they found the eggs of 4 species on these sticks.
Right. Hygiene sticks.
Hygiene sticks.
Today we have bidets instead. You can't.
I remember taking a trip to Bhutan once with my wife and visiting one of the zongs, which is like a castle for these monks. And the chief monk had his own throne, and it was a hole that went from the 3rd floor of this zong all the way down to the basement.
Right.
And so there was no collection or anything else until it got all the way down there, and then they would use it as fertilizer.
Yeah, they had those in the castles in the medieval days as well throughout Europe. Yeah. They would have thrones, and they were connected many floors down to the moat sometimes even, or collection space. Yeah. We're better off nowadays, right?
So you might say that kings make quite a splash.
Wow. Is that the title of this episode?
I hope not.
All right. You can find TWiP at iTunes, also at microbe.tv/TWiP. Consider becoming a patron and donate to help keep us going here. You can give as little as $1 a month. Go to patreon.com/microbe.tv.
Say that again.
$1 a month.
If every listener, we have 20,000 people out there that are listening.
If half of them,
come on,
if a quarter of them gave
$1 a month, that's $12 a year.
My goal is $5,000 a month, and then we'll actually, if I got $5,000 a month, I'll get rid of the ads.
You know what? I'm going to do it.
Because I think it would be nice not to have ads. If we can get 5,000 people to give $1 a month,
I can't believe we can't do this.
I could hire someone. We could do transcripts. We could travel, and I get rid of the ads. It's not a lot of money. Or you could go to microbe.tv/contribute, and we have ways to give us money via PayPal or your credit card. Well, either way,
I'm going just as soon as this show is over.
You don't need to contribute. You're part of the show, Dickson.
No, I want us to succeed.
No, you're not supposed to support yourself. All right, send us your questions and comments. TWiP at microbe.tv. Daniel Griffin is here at Columbia University Medical Center. Thank you and welcome back.
Oh, a pleasure.
Dickson Despommier is at Trichomonas.org. Thank you, Dickson.
Had a great time.
And I'm Vincent Racaniello. I'm at virology.ws. The music you hear on TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. I want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, CuriosityStream and Drobo. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP is parasitic.